An update here today. Every day, something else, and the astrology is really popping here with these things. I'm going to be talking about Trump and the COVID and his recent turns here, and how, as I said, he's in quite a bit of health. Health risk is still very high, quite a bit of danger, even though today he left the hospital. Again, endangering himself and others, going back to the White House. And again, I just thought they were having it updated in live video, and him staging a photo op, standing on the balcony, taking off his mask, endangering people that are around him. He's a carrier of COVID at this point. And he's a spreader, super spreader, and he seems to be oblivious to infecting other people. He had that photo op yesterday. You've probably seen it by now. I could spend this whole time talking about his repellent behavior, but I actually want to stick more with the astrology at this point. It's so hard to believe that the president, any president, would be acting like this so recklessly. And anyway, there's a few things that I wanted to show you, though, that also have to do with the election. Some very recent polling has also came out, and again, I want to show you how this is happening in real time. So there's a couple things. Here's Trump's chart here. All right, and as I've said recently, he's in this Jupiter, Saturn, Mars dasha right now, and this is why he's experiencing such a difficult health issue right now, because again, Jupiter is the 8th house ruler because he has a Leo ascendant. Jupiter rules the 8th house, which can definitely be fatal illnesses and sudden and shocking, problems. Could also be sudden, shocking good things, which, by the way, he's been the president like right when Jupiter dasha started. So, but he's also running the subdasha of Saturn, which is the 6th house ruler, which is literally the planet of enemies, of illnesses, and of the consequences of how well we fight our battles. Because the 6th house is literally the indicator of fighting our battles and how well we do it, our ability to be of service and things like that. And Saturn is also the karaka, or the indicator of that. So it's a double indicator of that. And this, so Saturn is a double difficult planet for a Leo person. But then the 3rd level dasha Mars, which is a powerful planet for Trump because he's a Leo. Mars is his 4th and 9th house ruler, so it does give him a lot of power, especially in certain moments. He won the election in Rahu Mars dasha, but Mars also is the ruler of some very difficult planets. And when you stack up that Mars is the 3rd level, the tertiary level dasha planet after Jupiter, the 8th lord, Saturn, the very cruel secondary dasha lord, then Mars comes in as the 3rd level dasha lord underneath all of that difficulty. You have to start looking at in many ways the difficult possibilities of Mars, particularly when we see, since he started Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, like a little more than a month ago, he's had very difficult karma. We already see this playing out. So it really comports with that diagnosis, and not just with his health, but also with the election and with other events that have happened, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But let's start with the health thing. Again, if we look at the transit chart over here, this is showing that now, as I record this on the 5th at about 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, if we go back a couple days, you see, a couple days ago, which was Saturday, Mars was right at the edge of Pisces in what's called the Gandanta point, right between Pisces and Aries. And then yesterday, Mars crossed over into Pisces. Now today, as I'm recording this now, it's in this very, delicate Gandanta point where where energy is very, transitional and uncertain and unpredictable, and we need to be careful. Plus, it's a retrograde planet, And primarily, it's going through his 8th house. Again, this 8th house, this difficult, this planet literally where there could be death. And Mars going through the 8th house is dangerous. Mars and Rahu going through the 8th house or in the 8th house can be dangerous for sure, because the mistakes and consequences and recklessness and impulsivity of those two planets, because Mars and Rahu are the two planets of impulsiveness. And the 8th house consequences can be very big. 8th house problems can kill us. Mars can create an accident anyway, but an accident that happens in the 8th house area is an accident that could be fatal. That's why the 8th house, anytime you see that energy, you got to watch it. And as an astrologer, you tell the person, be careful now. This isn't a joke. I know you might be able to be Mr. Reckless, crazy person most of the time and get away with it because you have a powerful Mars in your natal chart and that's just your way. This is just what I do. I just, blow everything up and then manage the chaos or whatever it is that Trump generally does. Okay, great. Now you're getting the karmas of that difficult Mars as the ruler of your debilitated moon and Ketu, and it's also the ruler of Rahu and Sun through the nakshatra, and it's going through your 8th house. So maybe all of that bluster, bravado, Mars fighting, constant fighting, it's not going to work forever. None of us are immortal. And you look at these moments when these transits line up and it's like, oh, I don't know. That's not the time to be doing this stuff. Not when Mars is crossing over from the Gandanta point into the 8th house where it's going to be going for a while. Mars has set up home in the 8th house now. It would have been better if it happened a few weeks ago when Mars was still at least in the 9th house. Now, no. And again, what this means is that so far, like even with the diagnosis and what's been happening before, it's been lucky. Again, it's lucky that he's president. It's lucky that he's surrounded by all the people taking care of him. Mars has been going through the 9th house of luck. It ain't there anymore. It just went back into the 8th house. So again, this is no joke. This is not a joke. And again, he's just doing what he always does. I trust my gut. I do this. I go out and wave to people. I'm doing this and that. He's not taking the thing seriously. We can see it. And as we've probably seen on the news, as you've probably seen now, he's also taken a sort of cocktail of treatments that no one else has ever had. This experimental immuno booster thing, remdesivir, which is for serious patients, and a steroid to help boost, to help support. And the steroid especially it's a steroid, like steroids. We got Trump on steroids and on other drugs right now. This is, again, maybe it's not the same type of anabolic steroid like an athlete would take, but it's similar. And all indications are when people get on this super cocktail of stuff, at times the first responses to these things are often things like euphoria, mania. Because it's pumping your body full of things that it's not used to. And in some ways, especially after maybe getting a diagnosis where you felt sick, where you felt run down, you can get a jolt and a positive jolt from this charge, from one drug doing this, another, the steroid doing that. And you're like, I feel great. I feel great. And again, particularly with the steroid, it can create a kind of manic response. Sound familiar? And so this could be a very false positive, very false high, and especially with someone who doesn't seem to have much impulse control, doesn't seem to plan ahead very far anyway. Again, the thing that we just saw, I just watched it on the news, maybe many of you did as well, of this helicopter ride and him walking up the steps. By the way, by the time I got up the steps, I don't know if you noticed, I saw right away on the video, when you saw the close-up video, he was breathing. He had to stop and catch his breath a few times. He was like, he was trying not to show it, but he definitely was out of breath. Watch the video of that part of it once it gets to the top of the stairs. Then he stands there like saluting the helicopter, which again, it's all just theatrics. It's like, okay, here's someone playing president for us, reality show president, ravaged with a deadly virus who has no compunction about spreading it. Now he's back in the White House. COVID is now getting spread throughout the White House. All the people that work there, he's probably not going to honor the quarantine. God knows. Aside from all of that, though, this is the backdrop. He is not out of the woods by any means with the danger of this. As much as it might seem like it now, again, I'm not even going to get into the tweets that he said today about don't take it seriously and all. He's just a nightmare at this point, and he's showing to anybody else who has common sense that this man just is out of his league. By the way, in a minute when I talk about the election, I'm going to talk about these things more. And the things that I'm going to talk about have to do with a recent polling, and I'll show you how to look at these things. So, but again, if we get back to the transits, let me make the chart bigger again. Sorry. Back to the transits again. We still have K2 right on his moon. This is K2 in the sky, 2808. His moon is 2805. So right now, the moon is. I'm sorry, K2 is like right on his natal moon. I said this several days ago, that at least for much of this week, I said about for this, at least for the entirety of this week or several days into this week, he's in serious trouble here. Again, K2 is right on his moon now. Again, his doctors aren't telling us anything about what's happening with his lungs. Go back and watch the videos. I said his lungs are going to get ravaged these next few days. What do you think those drugs are there to do? And they don't come at a price. They come at a price. This thing can be ravaging your lungs while the steroid is keeping you strong. But the steroid also suppresses immunity. There's all kinds of things going on. These hardcore drugs do not come for free. You pay a price for using them. They can deplete other systems. They're hard on the internal organs. All kinds of stuff. So all of this stuff is up for grabs. Lungs and heart, especially because that's the fourth house. It's that part of the body, right? It's this part of the body here. That's the fourth house. That's where the lungs and the heart are. Because the moon is there, you would say that it probably has more to do with lungs initially because the moon is a kapha planet, which has to do with the lungs. The lungs are kapha. But his heart also is under duress, especially because Mars is also ruling this Rahu sun up here. And the transits right now, again, Rahu is going over this Rahu sun. And in particular, one of the transits I wanted to show you is of the moon at this point. And especially, I want to show you what happened the last time, a month ago, or I should say 27 days ago or so, when the moon was here in the sky. So I want to show you this, and just as an example of the karmas that Trump is getting right now. So this is a website of polling data, which I'll explain in a minute. But remember this? Remember this? 100 years ago, September 9th, 2020? September 9th, 2020, Bob Woodward's tapes, it came out. Remember that scandal? You hear him on tape saying, oh, this is dangerous. This coronavirus, watch out, this thing. And we knew that he knew all the way back in February that this was a extremely dangerous illness, but he kept playing it down, going before the cameras saying, it's just going to disappear, it's not a big deal. All the stuff we saw him do, don't wear a mask, it's not that big of a deal, we've got it under control, all of that stuff we've seen him say. He knew back in the beginning that it was dangerous. Now let's go back and look at what was happening on September 9th. What do you think? Where do you think the moon was? The moon, there's September 7th. Watch. September 8. That's where the moon is today. September 9, the moon would be tomorrow. The moon is exactly where it will be tomorrow. So the last time the moon was here was the day that story broke. And then, of course, it broke that day. But then the next day, the next 2 or 3 days, the next week, this was, again, just this shocking revelation where you hear him on tape saying, yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, it's deadly, dangerous, and other things. That was one thing. You heard him saying other things as well in his recordings with Woodward. But I'm doing this to put it in context because these are the transits right now. And I mainly was looking because, in case you don't know, we're like 27 days away from the election. And guess what? Where the moon's going to be 27 days from now? It's going to be here. Or, no, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, 1027. sorry, yeah, on it's going to be hit. This is election day, 11th on the 3rd. So we're literally 27 days away because the moon is a 27-day cycle. It's 28 days now. But again, I looked at this because I noticed, when this Woodward thing came out on September 9th, I was like, oh, that's the same place the moon is going to be on election day. Now I'm looking, I was wondering what's going to happen next month when the moon goes through that same portion of the sky. The moon goes through that same portion of the sky this time, and look, Trump's got COVID, and he's, whether he knows it or not, in serious mortal danger. And then a month from now, on election day, the moon is here. So all three of these transits, September 9th, October 6th, and then November 3rd, when the moon is going through this section where it's going to be on November 3rd, the moon is in the same place. So we already see where it was 30 days ago or a month ago. That was when that huge disclosure, one of the biggest stories of the recent season about how Trump knew about COVID the whole time, came out. And these things have been taking a chunk out of him and his poll numbers the entire time. Oh yeah, sorry, I got to bring the chart up again. Sorry, let me do that. Let me bring the chart up. Sorry, I've been doing this. This is the thing about sharing screens. Let me do it again. Okay, share. Sorry, let me do it again. My apologies. So this is election day. Okay, this is where it's going to be next week. I'm sorry, next month on November 3rd. Here's where it is now. This is October 6th. This is the chart for October 6th. Today is October the 5th. So again, at the same point on election day, the moon is right where it was now, the same point in the sky with Trump having COVID. The last time it was here was, oops, sorry, let me get this right. Last time it was here was on the 9th. This is when the Bob Woodward story broke. So you look at the moon in each of these places. This is the day that the Bob Woodward story broke. Look at the moon, Rohini, September 9th in Rohini. This is now, this is October 7th, but if we go October 6th, which is tomorrow, this is like exactly the same place. So it's the same nakshatras, Rohini and Mrigashira. That's where it is now. If we go back a month ago, October or September, I'm sorry, we want to go forward. Sorry, I'm getting a little spastic here. So this is election day, November 3rd. There it is. So the moon coming back over Trump's natal Rahu sun, because that's been the biggest thing that I've been watching relative to the election as well. I've been watching this now for several months. Yes, Trump is having his Rahu return, but on election night, the moon is going to be going over Trump's Rahu sun. And there are people who are saying, it's going over his Rahu sun in the 10th house, it's going to blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I'm not so sure. Let me watch this. It's always been a principle that I have that the transits of the planets, they act like our natal planet. Trump's natal moon is a debilitated moon with Ketu in Scorpio. And this, so this transit here, I've never been, in fact, I've always seen that the biggest disasters come with Trump based on really powerful lunation cycles. For example, full moons. He got COVID virus right after the full moon. The moon, these lunation cycles can be really vicious for Trump. A lot of that stuff with Stormy Daniels that happened, and those other scandals that happened early in his presidency, the impeachments, and a lot of the important moments that happened, really intense lunation cycles or transits of the moon going over these placements were very telling in the negative. because the moon for him is a very negative planet. It's debilitated with Ketu. So I started watching a few months ago to see what is the moon doing when it goes over his 10th house. These have been the last 2 times. Last month, it was Bob Woodward blows him up and exposes to the world these lies and secrets about what he actually knew about COVID. That was last month when the moon went over here. This month, it's this right now. It's COVID. Now, when the moon is going through his 10th house and going over his natal Rahu sun, it's right here. That's what we're living now. And then next month is election night. So I just have to say that I do not see this as on the level of the election as a favorable election transit. I don't see this as being favorable. I don't see this as being favorable. And by the way, we can also transfer this if we look at Biden's chart. Bring up the 2 charts. If we're comparing them on the level of an election, oops. Oh, come on. Yeah. If we're looking at the level of the election, these transits are also happening for Biden. Well, here's Biden's chart. And every one of these difficult things for Trump, the disclosure of Bob Woodward, Trump's COVID is not helping Trump. It's hurting Trump, I'm sure, because his numbers on COVID are in the toilet. Large majority, pretty much everyone except his following or base or cult or whatever you want to call it, thinks he's handled COVID disastrously. The poll numbers have been in now for months, and it's something like 30% of the country thinks he's done okay, and it's like 70% thinks it's been a disaster. That's everyone except his base. Realizes Trump has handled this horribly. That's only going to get worse now that he's contracted it and acting the way he's acting now. He's not getting any new voters with this. He's just taking people who are maybe on the fence still, which there are not even very many of them, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but he's even taking them and going, Jesus, what is up? What is this guy doing? This is not going to benefit him. But all of these negative Trump transits that I just showed are a plus to Biden. It's helping Biden. Again, you hurt your enemy, you help yourself. So Trump, the disclosures of Woodward that hurt Trump, you can see in Biden's chart, because this is Biden's chart, it's actually going through his 7th house, like it's going to be on election night. So on election night, like again, a month ago when the moon went through Trump's 10th house, it went through Biden's 7th house. It went over his natal Saturn, aspected all this. And again, that was a favorable thing for Trump, that those disclosures came out against, I'm sorry, for a Biden, that those disclosures came out against Trump. That helped Biden. This, again, I think Biden has conducted himself, of course, with a lot of class. He's not doing any victory celebrations about Trump getting COVID, but I'm saying in aggregate, as far as the election is concerned, it's certainly not hurting Biden that Trump has proven it's like a testimonial to his incompetence, that he's so protected and still now everyone around him has it and he's being so reckless. That's only going to help Biden. So when we project this to election night, God knows what's going to come out then. But of course, I don't think it's going to be favorable. I think it's going to make it even more of a cloud. So again, when trying to evaluate something like an election and making a prediction, these are the kinds of things that I do and that you should do, especially to evaluating those transits on that night. Now I'm going to get into the transits even more at some point. I am going to do, and again, I keep doing this and saying this, but I am going to do a final bring it all together election prediction maybe next week, because I got a really busy week this week. But these things incrementally are really important to see, not just for that, but so you can see how astrology works. And this is how you do research and do case studies. You watch transits and see what happens. So I had a feeling that this transit through Trump's 10th house is not that favorable. By the way, I've heard astrologers the whole time saying this is a favorable thing. But election night, the moon is going through Trump's 10th house. The moon is going over Trump's sun Rahu, which is what makes him a king. So the moon is going to really coronate him as a king. This is a lot of stuff people are saying, that this is very favorable for Trump, this transit. Well, so far, Not so much. Last month certainly didn't help him. The Woodward disclosure didn't win him any new fans. In fact, it starts to chip away. That's why his polling is so bad, which I'm going to get to in a second. This month, certainly, unless, again, if you're a Trump supporter and you think everything he does is great, maybe you think this is a real benefit for him. Okay, we'll see how that plays out. I don't think the COVID, I don't care what he does at this point, whether how he comes back and if he seems to defeat it or something. Again, his supporters are going to love anything he does, but no one else watching this is going to be like, oh, that was great. Yeah, I want him to keep running the country 4 more years, unless you're already just thinking that. And by the way, I said this before, he had a real opportunity to get a sympathy vote, maybe a sympathy bounce, you would call it, after this, which is the same thing that happened with Boris Johnson, with Bolsonaro in Brazil. They all got sympathy bounces, but they also handled it. They went off and were sympathetic figures. Again, everything is not the same. I think he could have gotten a sympathy bounce about this, but I think, again, 2 or 3 days of him doing what he's done, it's done. It's kind of like, okay, no. I feel sympathetic for everybody around you who you're exposing to the virus. So again, I don't even think he's going to get that grace. So let me show you some of this this polling as well, because this is how I do research, and I think it would be good for you to also look at this. And I'll show you some of these websites that shows you the reality of the polling right now, and that's what's been happening the entire time. Some people, especially those who like to troll me, and especially act like I just listen to mainstream media or whatever, not like I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on that here, but I don't listen to what any announcers or personalities say about any of it. I look for data and then I research based on data. And again, polling data is about as accurate as you can get. And by the way, the polling data was accurate in 2016. 538.com gave Trump about a 25% chance of winning in 2016. And he did. And it was a long shot. And he wound up drawing this inside straight and wound up winning, based on that percentage. And so this, these percentages are shown right now. They have it about 81-18 Biden on 538. But you want to understand the way this thing works. These are all the states. This is the state where they're saying Pennsylvania is the one that could swing it, quote, so to speak. Could be. That would mean if Trump carried all of these states, which includes North Carolina, where he's behind, Florida, where he's behind, Arizona, where he's behind, this second section of Nebraska, then he would also have to win Pennsylvania. So Trump has to make all of this up. Now you could say, well, he could do it. He could do it. Okay, he could do it. But again, all of these other states, which he won in 2016, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they're not even in play right now. Biden is ahead, and again, I want you to see the way these numbers work. They have him 6 points ahead. Again, this is like, he's got to turn around 6 points in a month. Could happen, not likely. Again, they're going to do some things to try to come out, especially with disclosures that Bill Barr is putting together and things like that. But again, it's got to chip away at a very, very strong lead. And by the way, look at this. Biden has never been behind in all of these states. Look in Pennsylvania. He's never been close. I just want to show you a few of these. So that's the one. And again, all of these other ones are even more solid. All of these other states are even more solid. Like Wisconsin, it's even harder. It's even more intractable. Just so you see, Wisconsin 6.7 and the same kind of thing. So this is the line right here where Trump not only has to gain all of this back, including Texas, but Iowa, Georgia, Ohio, they just put back in a favoring Trump category. But Trump has to hold all of this. Then he's got to also turn around North Carolina, Florida, where he's behind by a few points. Again, 3 points. But look at the recent trends. Trump going down. But one of the most important things is Trump has never been ahead. Again, this is one of the things to really look at when you're looking at the data. Trump has never been ahead. He's been behind the whole time. So now he's going to make up these points. Yes, it could happen. Not likely. You just don't see that much. And again, that's here. Arizona, again, another one. Arizona, which is a Republican stronghold. That was John McCain's state. Look, 4 points. He's got to turn around 4 points in Arizona. He's never been a lead. He's never been in the lead. So again, all the way up to here, you can just see this is just data. So again, it would be remarkable if Trump could turn this around. There's a few other things that you should know just about the data here. And again, I'm not going to be taking questions. I'm just going to, say this stuff here because it's just too much. But it's a big difference in the race now than it was in 2016. Okay, in 2016 there weren't two incumbents. They were both. Now we have an incumbent. And the incumbent has a great advantage, which is Trump, because he has a record to run on. Or if it's disastrous, he has to run against it. And typically what happens is when you get this late in a race, anyone who is independent, anyone who is undecided, I should say, undecideds late in the race almost always break for the non-incumbent or the outsider or the opposition party. They broke for Trump in 2016 because Hillary Clinton was seen as the incumbent because she was a Democrat and associated with Barack Obama, and Trump was seen as the new blood. Well, this year, first of all, there's not as many swing voters. In all polling, pretty much, I think it's about 5 to 6% are still undecided, which is not very many at all. And I mean, we're talking about hardened views at this point. I am definitely not voting for Trump. I am definitely not voting for Biden. It's pretty hardened at this point. 2016, it wasn't. Even with a couple weeks left, there was still about 15% undecided. And that always makes the polling more difficult. And again, even those polls that I just showed you where Biden has been ahead the whole time and all this, it wasn't like that in 2016. It was up and down the whole time. There was a lot of swings because there was a lot of undecided voters. Who seems undecided to you at this point? Do you know anybody who's undecided? I don't. So what would have to happen for Trump to turn all of this around is pretty much every undecided voter, plus many we can't really account for, would have to almost all of them go for Trump. So again, why aren't they already for Trump? Trump is such a repellent, divisive person that he's already got those people. And again, he makes it clear that's all he cares about anyway. He's not trying to get anybody else. He can't even come out clearly and say white nationalism, white supremacy is utterly disgusting. And I decry all and make clear, hard statements against that stuff. Even the most basic. Yeah, he can sort of deny it after all this stuff. And again, it's just sending dog whistles. No one's fooled by this anymore except people that don't want to see it. But this kind of thing has hardened so much opposition against him. And a lot of those were the swing voters that said, well, I don't know, he's a kind of weird businessman, and I don't really like a lot about his style, but can't be much worse than what we've had, and they take a chance. Now they've seen it. So the polling indicates this, by the way. I'm not going to pull up every poll I can find, but there was a recent poll that just came out yesterday where the we see the overview here. I'm going to bring this up. Yeah, here it is. 14-point Biden lead after the debate yesterday. 14 points. This is a reputable, this is NBC News Wall Street poll. 14 points against the incumbent. And again, I wouldn't say that it's absolutely 14 points, but just the fact that it could be this skewed is a reputable NBC Wall Street Journal poll. And some of the biggest shifting that we've seen is in those certain demographics that Trump clearly won on in 2016, which was the suburban vote, the suburban white women vote. Why do you think the Republican convention was all about to scare people in the suburbs? That was oriented toward, and he kept saying White House wives and all this stuff, because that was a big demographic that Trump won in 2016, and he knows it. He knows the poll numbers as well as anybody. He knows how much trouble he's in. But look, even here, the biggest declines for Trump were among seniors and suburban women who are now backing Biden, 62 to 35 seniors and 58 to 33 respectively. He's in this latest poll, he is losing seniors by almost 30 points and suburban women by 25. He won them in 2016. Again, we have data, and all of the data from these other polls. There's another great website called Real Clear Politics. Again, you can go to their thing and click on polls and go to the and then just click on these maps. They're being much more conservative, and they're not putting a probability here. Oh, this is for the Senate. So this is a battle for the Senate. You can also see how many Senate seats are up for grabs. But if we find the presidential race, electoral college, yeah. So they have these as being hardened, 226 to 125. But all of these that they say are toss-ups, again, they have the same numbers as 538 does. They're still calling Pennsylvania a toss-up, but it's still 6 points, almost 7 points for Biden. In all of these that look like a toss-up, Michigan, 5.2 for Biden. Again, Wisconsin, probably more. Wisconsin, 5.5. So in all of these ones that are even called toss-ups, North Carolina, 1.2. So some of these are closer. Florida, 2 is about 2 points, I think. And Texas is for Trump, but it's still close. Trump has only had 3 points in Texas. So again, a lot of this is, no matter how you look at it, Arizona, again, Biden up by 3 points according to these polls. So, but again, when you look at it, it's the same demographic. This is back in March, but you see, they're a little more conservative here and there, but it's still, Trump has never been leading in any of this polling. And again, all of the polling indicates, this is Pennsylvania, this is kind of like the line. All of it indicates that he doesn't have the votes, and he knows he doesn't have the votes. And this is why there's all of this. This is why his strategy, it's almost like he abandoned a real strategy months ago, because he knew that he was so far behind. And his strategy is muck up the election, question the results, fire up my base, try to get them fired up to, have civil war or something. That seems to be the strategy at this point. Because he's already saying that the results are not going to be legitimate. He's already saying it's going to be rigged. If you thought you were going to win, would you say it's rigged? Of course not. So again, I said this a couple months ago when I first started looking at this that he's just losing, man. This dasha, this Jupiter-Saturn is a vicious dasha for him, starting last year when he got impeached and all this other stuff, continuing now with all the disclosures coming out, his family against him. Again, his brother just died. His brother died. His niece wrote the book. His sister came out. Again, all these disclosures, like with Bob Woodward, showing that he knew about the coronavirus. Not to mention 2 or 3 other things. All the scandals about Putin paying bounty against our soldiers. So many things coming out. Now he gets COVID, and some people say that this is going to help him. This ain't going to help him, because he's been wanting to take the emphasis off of this issue because he loses on this issue. We have the polling. We know what people think of it, of his handling of it. Now he's caught it. And again, right now, they're gentle with it, but they're going to start campaigning again, and it's going to be a representative of how incompetent he is. And we see our country still not back to work and all this. There's no uniform testing, no contact tracing, none of this stuff. And this is just going to show it. And we see these transits. I'm doing astrology here. Again, I just showed you a month ago when the moon went through here was when Bob Woodward disclosures came out. This month, he's got COVID. And he's literally like ravaged by a disease. Next month, on election night, the same transit. I just don't see this as like, this moon going through his 10th house and over his moon Rahu is going to be a real benefit. No, I'll tell you who it's been a benefit for the last 2 times is Joe Biden. Because the last time the moon went through the place where it's going on election night. We'll just talk purely about the election. The last time it went through the place it's going to be on election night, again, was the Woodward disclosures. That did nothing but help Joe Biden. Now, this COVID, again, it's certainly not hurting Joe Biden that Trump White House in disarray. And now next month, it's the same transit when the moon goes through there. Just looking at that day, because the moon transit is the day. That's the day you're looking at. Is definitely, as we've seen now for 2 months preceding, is more favorable for Biden. Twice now we've seen it in a dramatic fashion. That's why I say Trump's moon, because his moon is so important to him, because he was born on a lunar eclipse. So the moon becomes very powerful for him, a very powerful indicator when the moon hits different planets, when you get these lunation cycles. Again, we see it right now. He just had the full moon in his 8th house when the COVID diagnosis happened. It was on a lunation, the full moon in his 8th house. So these moon transits are really important. So this moon going over here is going to be really big. So I wanted to make this update just to show, again, it's an astrology case study that here he is now. Again, we're here on the 5th. We're here on October 5th, and the moon is here. It just went into Taurus in Kritika Nakshatra. Again, tomorrow it's going to be, these next couple of days, like I said, I'll go back to what I said over the weekend. This week is a very difficult time for him. His lungs are getting pummeled on some level by this virus. He's not well yet. Steroid or whatever he's going through notwithstanding. We'll see what happens. Let's see what happens the next couple of days. Again, the last time the moon was where it is going to be tomorrow was the day of the Woodward disclosures. Let's see what happens the next couple of days. But so far, I would say that this moon going over his Rahu sun for the next couple of days, it's not going to be like good news days for him. Even if he turns the corner on COVID and all like that, like all of a sudden, suddenly. Again, first of all, we all have to understand as well, no matter what happens in the next few days, he's not going to be out of the woods with COVID for a while. And the issue itself, by the way, I'm not saying I think he's going to die from it either. I'm talking about the issue, because we might say, oh, he looked good today and he did this sort of thing. It didn't look so bad. This illness isn't just going to leave his body anytime soon. And we can see with these transits, again, you also want to understand, it's not just that Ketu moon here, that these transits of Ketu going over his moon, it's not just ravaging it now. Okay, what happens is Ketu going over it is showing the stress and the damage that can be happening right now. And we already know this, so much so because he's been on this cocktail trying to literally keep him alive. He's had oxygen, he's on remdesivir, he's had this other immuno cocktail, and now a steroid to try to manage what's going on in there. Because Ketu is going over there ravaging this part right now. We know. His lungs are getting damaged. And they're trying to control it. Otherwise, you wouldn't put him on these medicines. We're not stupid. But that's what's happening now. Even when Ketu passes, like let's say next week, I'll move this forward a week. I'll move the transits forward a week. So again, Ketu will have passed over the moon. Then it's really close to his natal Ketu. But then you still have this Mars. He's going to be dealing with this Mars going through the 8th house. Again, this transit of Ketu going over the moon can show the damage that's being happening and the stress that's happening now for a week or two. That's going to keep happening with this really close proximity of Ketu to his moon and his natal Ketu. But even after that, maybe acute moment passes, he's going to be grappling with this Mars going through his 8th house. Again, here's election day; it's still there. He's going to be retrograde for time after that. So the seriousness of these transits are going to be going for a while. So regardless of what happens even over the next couple of days, he's not out of the woods. And by the way, a few of these things I said before, and I said it early in the season, especially when when the Bernie Sanders people were really lamenting how Biden got the nomination. And I said it at the time that I think in this day and age, even though I would have probably liked Bernie's policies a little more just because they're more progressive and more democratic, but Bernie could have been a more difficult candidate to win because of the chaos that Trump represented. And the reason people went against Bernie is because people don't want a socialist revolution. We don't want another revolution after all this. One of the things I've been saying from day one is by the time Rahu starts going through Taurus, people are going to want calm. We're going to want stability and calm and level-headedness. And Biden represented that much better than Bernie Sanders. So these older voters that took a chance on Trump, older, more conservative, who just, they are much more comfortable with Biden. How does Biden make you that uncomfortable? I'm sorry, but again, he's just not that scary. He's not crazy socialist Hillary. So with all of those potential swing voters, especially the older ones, and the suburban ones, and a lot of the older white people, which Trump won, you can easily see Biden just gobbling them up easily. He's certainly not threatening. Again, the whole attempt to portray Biden as this dangerous socialist who's being hijacked and all like that. Again, I'm not saying there might not be some truth to that, because he's trying to hold together a party where there is a very extreme left wing to it at this point. I say very extreme. Their extreme left wing, 30 years ago, they would have been just called Democrats. They're not that radical, for God's sake. Healthcare for everybody is not that radical. Reappropriating some money, it's not that radical, but it's portrayed this way, maybe legitimately so. Again, but it's just not an easy sell. And especially because Trump has shown himself to be such a, frankly, bullshitter for so long, coming from him, it's almost like everything looks like spin. And so that whole kind of attempt to smear Biden as a radical lefty and things like this, it never looked like a good strategy. He's not Bernie Sanders. Could have worked against Bernie Sanders. So as much as it looked like, oh, the DNC did it again to Bernie and all like that, at the time I was like, yeah, that's what happened. But you know what? I think this is a better move. I think this is better. I think this is more likely to beat Trump than Bernie Sanders. I was really worried that Bernie Sanders was going to get the nomination and the Democratic Party would go completely ape over it, especially the establishment Democrats. But Biden was like, because we're in this time for where again, I said it back then, that by the time we get to election, we're going to have Rahu and Taurus, and we're going to want things that are more stable and settled. Primary season, Rahu was still in Gemini, and we're fired up, but things are going to change. And by the time we get to now, we want some stability, for God's sake. We're going to be electing, like, who is sane enough to run this country at this point? Our standards have fallen really far. And I've been saying it for months. Those of you who watch my updates know I have. That's what I've said is going to be one of the most powerful drivers of this election, is what's going to bring stability. And look at what we have a month before the election. And again, there's people who argued with me and said, well, you think Biden represents more stability. People think Trump does. Okay, great. But that's going to be the calculus. I think more than, as much or more than anything, is what's stable, what's sane, what's even unifying. So I think one of the reasons why Trump has lost a lot of those swing voters as well is just because of the overt divisiveness. And so you've seen it in the poll numbers. I mean, God, 14-point loss, 14 points behind in the polls. Man, that's unbelievable. 14 points, it's unheard of. It's almost like no one but his base at this point. Now, again, it's only one poll, and it's a national poll, but you see the trend in all of these state polls as well. So Trump is going to try to delegitimize it. He's already saying it's going to be rigged because he knows he's not going to get enough votes. And I'm just going to flat out say it. Yeah, that's what I think. By the way, I've said it the whole time. I haven't really changed. But I'm going to put in a larger context in another video as well. But I wanted to talk about this over, at the moment, because it's not only a health issue, but we also see the health loss. As I said, this video is, Trump and COVID election updates, and it's losses everywhere. Losing everywhere. Losing in his health. Losing he's losing it all. And by the way, he's dragging the Republicans down with him. All of those Republican seats that we saw in Real Clear Politics, pretty much every one of those Republican seats, The Republicans are either losing or they're behind. Susan Collins, Joni Ernst, even Lindsey Graham is tied. All of those swing Republicans, they're all losing. He's dragging them all down with him. And so this, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want it to be so political, but these are the times we're in right now. And I've been talking about these things in the politics, and these and they're very good for case studies, even though they're divisive. So people get angry, but they're good for case studies because they're real things happening. They're not just a bunch of concepts. So anyway, all due respect to people and their views and whatnot. I have my views. I respect you have your views, even though you might hate that I say them. Sorry. I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to keep saying what I think. So you're free to say what you think too. It's still a democracy, at least at this point. So everybody have a good day.